So the year is 2050, and the news headlines announce that there are now 1 billion under 18-year-olds on the continent of Africa. I am in my 80s, my oldest is 43, and his children are counted amongst that billion. Now let's travel back in time. The year is 1950, and my grandfather is 24, and he's just had his first child. He stands in that moment and realizes that the world has changed, and that the educational training that had brought his father's success would not work for his children or his grandchildren. So he decides to take a different educational path and commits to educate, to send his children, both boys and girls, to the best learning institutions that trained for this new world. Because of his foresight, he secured the future for my father and his siblings and the generation of his grandchildren. In 2006, my husband Simba and I found ourselves looking down at our newborn son and asking ourselves what I can imagine my grandfather having asked. If we were to educate our son the same way that we had had the privilege of being educated, would he be equipped for the world of his generation? Though 56 years stood between my grandfather and us, there was one thing that was common to both our situations, and that was change. Change in the way people move, work, and live will always necessitate a change in how they should be educated, regardless of where in time we find ourselves. We were seeing a massive wave of disruptive change that would shape the worlds of our children, but more so our grandchildren who'd be born to be part of this 1 billion. What we weren't seeing was change in how education was being delivered in tandem with these social and technological innovations. So what did we do? Unlike 56 years earlier, when our grandparents had their choice of relevant quality institutions to pick from, we couldn't find any that were addressing what the World Economic Forum had outlined as the 16 key skills that young people needed in order to succeed in the 21st century. It was crucial for us that our children not only be able to read, write, and count, but that we also deliberately develop their ability to create and innovate, to think critically through problems, and to come up with possible solutions, and then to persevere in the implementation of those solutions. So we took matters into our own hands. And alongside our children's traditional education, we created opportunities for them to enrich their learning through activities that were designed to develop these missing competencies and character traits. So within a few years, our son, now joined by 2 siblings, stood out from amongst his peers. Our children were curious and innovative. They communicated well. They were not afraid to share their ideas with peers or with elders. They were taking what they were learning in the classroom and finding ways to apply it in real life. And they were also acutely aware of technological change and its ability to create new opportunities, but also its power to bring redundancy to what they were familiar with. So before long, we had friends asking us to work with their children. And what started out for us as a personal quest to equip our children has become our life's mission to ensure that this generation of young people is capacitated and able to build the infrastructure that will be needed to cater to the needs of the 1 billion young people that are coming.
May I ask Ntando for the 4 volunteers, please? Okay. Please come forward to our maker space. Okay.
Congratulations.
So, we are going to have a speed maker session. Now, our 4 volunteers are going to build a hydraulic lifting platform like the one you see before me. Now, in our work, we work with young people, and we do activities similar to this because it is through activities like this that the competencies that Priscah talked about are actually developed. Now, your mission is to build a hydraulic lifting platform like our prototype over here. Now, no pressure. We've had 5-year-old kids put this together. No pressure. Your rules are quite simple. You are to use the components before you to put together a hydraulic lifting platform such as this. Now, you may not get help from the audience. You can only get help from yourselves. You may not get help from the presenters. Right? You have 5 minutes to accomplish this. You may begin now. Right? While they're working, I'll continue with the presentation. Now, we live in an age of such unrelenting change like has never been experienced in the history of mankind. And for the last century, education has delivered on its promise that at the end of their educational journeys, young people and learners will get a certificate that guaranteed them a well-remunerated job and a lifelong comfort. Okay? However, the challenge that education faces today is that the world is changing so fast, and there's a fast-growing disconnect between educational outcomes and the needs of the 21st century workplace. You find that workplace skill profiles are changing so fast that the educational model that we're using today is fast losing relevance. So in 2016, the World Economic Forum commissioned a study to study the future of jobs, to find out more about this trend. And what came out in the result in the study was that job families, the nature of work is actually changing. You find that there's a lot more jobs involving creativity. Your architecture and engineering were on the increase, whereas a lot of job families like office administration are actually on the decline. The nature of skills is actually changing. There's a lot more demand for jobs with cognitive abilities, system skills, complex problem solving, yet jobs with needing physical abilities and technical skills were actually on the decline. So, how do we educate and create a talent pipeline for a future we cannot predict? So, the report found that for young people to thrive in the 21st century, they need to acquire 16 skills divided into 3 categories. Now, your first category are your foundational literacies, which is more or less what we've been doing with education. That's your literacy, your numeracy. We then have the second category, which are the competencies. These are also known as your 4 C's, where you have critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration. And we have a third category, which is your character qualities. Now, all this is actually not new. And you find that categories 2 and 3 have more or less been sidelined in the traditional education system, because back then, the workplace demanded that you just show up for work and you follow instructions. So, what is the solution? The solution is maker learning. Now, maker learning adds categories 2 and categories 3 to what we are already doing in our school system. When we create opportunities in our learning places where young people can get hands-on experience with what they're doing and work in teams, we give them an opportunity to experience the 21st century workplace. Now, as our makers will find out, sometimes parts may not come together, okay? And they have to persist through challenges. Sometimes the parts may not come together, and they may have to put down the script and use good old-fashioned trial and error. Now, our makers are faced with building something for which they do not have any experience, okay? Through this, they get to develop their initiative, their persistence, and develop leadership skills, because you'll find that one person might decide that the way in which the problem should be solved is different to the other. Now, our time is almost up. Okay, our time is almost up. Let's take a look at what our novice engineers have done. Okay, let's see. Okay, you've made a lot of progress. It's pretty good for novice engineers. Okay, I think at this time our time is up. Thank you. May we all give them a round of applause. Right, thank you. You may take your seats. Now, through Maker Learning, learners are able to develop the 21st century competencies, our critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration. Right, Maker Learning is an adventure into the unknown. It makes learning content relevant to everyday life situations. The outcome of Maker Learning is a young person who is fully equipped to contribute to the unpredictable needs of an ever-changing society.
So for 3 generations, the young people of Africa have been encouraged to work hard, to study, and to pass exams. The purpose for their education was to gain a certificate, and that was okay when there were industries to employ and retain them. But in an environment where there are no jobs, learning for the sake of a certificate only is a disservice to our youth, to our communities, our nation, and the continent. The purpose of learning should be to gain knowledge, and then to apply that knowledge by processing it and applying it to the problems that we have all around us. It is through the pursuit of solutions to these problems that our young people on this continent will be able to create jobs and work for themselves and for others. The 1 billion young people that is coming is going to present Africa with either her greatest opportunity for growth and development or her greatest social disaster. If these young people fail to find their place and relevance in the global marketplace. So what's next for African education? Change. Change that starts with a radical redefining of the purpose of education in the minds of our policymakers, our educators, our parents, and the learners themselves. And then urgent action to start building the framework that will produce fulfilled and productive African youth in 2050. Our story is one of parents who stood up to take action in order to secure the future for generations to come. We have an opportunity right now in our generation to decide what the headline next to that 2050 caption will be. Will it read, Africa's 1 billion, the continent's greatest asset and opportunity? Or will it read, Africa's 1 billion, the continent's greatest tragedy? We get to decide what's next. Thank you.